Hi all, Adi here from Hunts and Johns. As always, thank you so much for clicking on the video. I'm in deepest, darkest Sussex and I'm going to visit a church called St Mary's in Upwaltham, and it stood here for over 900 years. It has a very interesting memorial inside to some airmen who sadly lost their lives in the war, and also it's reputed to be haunted, and it is called the Church in the Field. And when I show you, you will understand why. I mean, you can already see, although you can hear the road down below, it is deep in the Sussex countryside. So let's go and have an explore. St Mary's Church, tucked away in the South Downs, is often called the Church in the Field, and when you arrive it's really easy to see why, because the church seems to sit almost on its own in the landscape, surrounded by fields, open countryside and the rolling downs. The setting feels wonderfully isolated, peaceful and timeless. And as I walk through the churchyard, it's worth remembering that this is one of the oldest surviving buildings in the area. Now, the church itself dates back to the Norman period, around the 12th century. And although parts of it, of course, have been altered over the centuries, the basic shape of this building has changed remarkably little. In fact, much of what we see today follows the simple plan laid out nearly 900 years ago. Whilst the churchyard itself has a wonderful rural feel to it, sheep have grazed these slopes for centuries, and beyond the gravestones, the views across the valley have changed surprisingly little. The medieval village that once stood here has largely disappeared, leaving the church as its most visible survivor, and that sense of isolation is part of what makes it so special. I'm just going to walk inside now, and the atmosphere changes immediately. The thick stone walls shut out the outside world. It's quiet, cool and simple, and it's got this stunning red ceiling. Although it isn't a grand cathedral or a wealthy parish church, it's a modest country church that served generations of local people for almost a millennium. One of the oldest features here is this lovely Norman font. It's a simple tub-shaped font dating from the 12th century, and countless baptisms have taken place beside it over the centuries. And as always, I think about the generations of local families who would have stood here baptising the newest members of their family. And it's these type of details, as always, that connect us directly with the earliest days of the church. There's a wonderful memorial in this church called the Four Nations War Memorial, and it remembers 15 airmen from Australia, America, Britain and Canada who lost their lives in 2 separate air crashes near Upwaltham during the Second World War. Now, the plaque here was unveiled in 2009 after years of work by local residents who wanted to ensure that the men would never be forgotten. The first tragedy occurred on the 13th of February 1944 when a Lancaster bomber from the famous 617 Squadron, which were the Dambusters, and it had returned from operations in southern France. It had stopped at Ford Airfield. The aircraft took off again in poor weather to return to its base. There was low cloud and poor visibility caused the Lancaster to strike the trees on the downs which are just above Upwaltham. Now, sadly, all 8 members of the crew lost their lives. They'd come from Britain, Canada and Australia, and their loss is still remembered here today. And almost exactly a year later, on the 11th of February 1945, a United States Army Air Force's Dakota C-47 transport aircraft crashed on the opposite side of the valley in extremely poor visibility again. And now the crew appeared to have descended through cloud without realising they had crossed the English coastline. The aircraft struck trees on Upwaltham Hill and it broke apart, and sadly all 7 men on board lost their lives. So together these two accidents claimed 15 lives. And this memorial in here really quietly links those four nations through a shared story of sacrifice. And standing in here surrounded by the silence of this little church, it's really not difficult to pause and reflect on how suddenly those poor young men lost their lives in the hills around us. Moving on through the church, you'll notice the simplicity of the interior. The nave and the rounded apse here at the eastern end preserve a layout that is now quite rare. Some of the windows here were added in later centuries, but the building still feels unmistakably medieval. I'm going to walk back down through the nave and look at some old ledger stones and memorials, so please do pause if you'd like to read them in more detail. Now, it's easy to understand why this church has gained a reputation for being haunted. Stories have circulated locally for many years. Visitors often talk about an unusual atmosphere here, especially when the church is empty or when there's a mist hanging around the surrounding fields. And I think because the church stands here alone in the landscape, every creak of timber and every change of light always seems amplified. Now, while there are plenty of tales and rumours, there is of course no documented evidence of specific hauntings, and much of the church's ghostly reputation seems to come from its isolation, great age, and perhaps the tragic wartime events that have been remembered here. Even so, it doesn't take much imagination to see why people associate this place with lingering spirits and old stories, and the setting here certainly encourages it. And perhaps that's the real charm of St Mary's. It's a church of history, memory and atmosphere. A Norman building standing almost alone in a field, a survivor of a vanished medieval settlement, a place that remembers 15 airmen from 4 nations, and a church that still inspires stories of ghosts and mysteries along the South Downs. So whether you want to come here for the history, the architecture, or to look at the wartime memorials, or you can just simply enjoy the peace and quiet. And St Mary's Church really does remain as one of Sussex's most remarkable hidden churches. I'm going to wrap the video up here. I do hope you enjoyed it. That church is definitely haunted. 10 out of 10 without the shadow of a doubt. I didn't see anything, but I could definitely tell something didn't want me to be there. It's really weird. I thought I saw something on the camera, but I think it's just a bush. It's because I haven't got my glasses on. It looked like something else. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy it, if you could please like, subscribe, hit the hype button, do all of that. I really do appreciate it, and I really appreciate each and every one of you for watching my videos. I appreciate it more than you'll ever know. So thanks again, and I shall see you for the next one. Bye for now.